behind me.
Okay, hi. So let's
Hiya.
let's start with some easy ones. Tell me your name and where you're calling from and the title of your piece.
Hi, my name is Danielle Brathwaite-Shirley. I'm calling from London, Clapham right now. And the title of my piece is called City of Dreams.
And when did you make it? It was like 2020, right?
I think so. I think it was, yes, it
Or
was
early 21, yeah.
20, no, I think it was 2021 actually.
And yeah, tell me more about sort of what your workflow was to create it at the time.
Oof. Oh, that's a really good question. So I think, well, so it was a bit of getting used to the engine, really. So um, at the time when you gave me an invite to kind of create a world in there, I actually didn't have an idea of what I wanted to make, but I knew the kind of era I wanted it to speak to. So I knew I wanted it to speak to like very early PS1 first person walking through. Imagine if you're remaking Silent Hill Town. So like really dense fog. You don't know, you can't really see that far in front of you. And I had just finished making this work about a fog in a city, and so a fog overtaking a city. And so I kind of went at it from a similar mindset of imagining a place that had to kind of been overtaken by a fog emanated by people protesting, and hopefully that fog making it easier for people to breathe. Um, and so I slowly began to populate the space with some of these buildings and with a few like scans of some 3D cars that I had done. Um, and after a while, it kind of made a lot more sense to kind of link other works within it. And then it slowly kind of built itself out. It's one of those works where it you begin one way and the work talks you into building it into a completely different way.
Totally. And yeah, I mean, I remember how quickly you seemed to make it. I feel like I looked in one day and I looked in like a couple days later and it was like, boom, done. And it definitely like it feels kind of like a survey of a lot of the other like interactive works you were making at the time.
Hmm.
And so 2021, this is like deep pandemic. I'm
Yeah.
curious kind of like what your practice was like before the pandemic and how, if at all, the pandemic like impacted it.
Yeah. So just before the pandemic, I had finished university, and I had just finished making my first online piece called Black Trends Archive, and was just transitioning to making video games. And so it was very strange because I had no idea of how to make a video game, and I just finally had figured out how to do it with the help of an amazing coder called Emily Martinez, who I think maybe is in LA. I'm not sure. But we released that in February 2020 with an install and an online version. And so I was moving towards making more games because before that I had always made animations, like 40-minute animations that had the pretense of an interactive moment. So for example, an inventory would pop up and show you what you've got equipped, or a cursor would appear on the screen and click on things, but none of them were actually interactive. And so I was always wanting to push towards this interactive space, this world, and had no idea how to do it. And when we just finished that game and then entered the pandemic, I was like, well, I have just made an online work, so I better continue making those because I think that's the only thing we'll be able to do for the foreseeable future.
And so, like, what media would you say you typically work with now, or like, how has your practice evolved since then?
Mm. So I would say my main medium is the audience. I would definitely say that it's my audience now because I jump from engine to engine depending on what the project is. Like every project, I pretty much use a new engine, and so it's like a from ground zero all the time. But it's all about getting the audience to move in ways that they're maybe not expecting, and get them to give as much as possible, so that the work doesn't have to do all the work, and instead they have to give more in order to get more out of the exhibition. So I've now toyed around with making them carry things, making them kneel down to play the games, sit in boats, give their names, making them miss a lot of the content, to be honest. And it's a lot more about building a space in which they feel like they have to not behave as an art audience and instead become part of the work in order to get something out of it.
I love that. Yeah, like sort of resisting this urge to like passively witness.
Mm.
Um, and I know you've done a lot of work in both physical and virtual space, and you're kind of like agnostic to game engines. I guess the first question I have is about virtual space. Like, how do you approach working with all of these different engines?
Um, so usually I do this thing often where I'm playing a lot of video games and I take note of what it was made in. And when a project comes along, I often go through that list and see what engine I think will be most appropriate for archiving the individuals or the method or the idea that I'm working with. And so usually that kind of conversation with me and the engine happens at the beginning. Through like a variety of little tests, and I see which one is the best fit. And it's not just the best fit in terms of like visuals, it usually is the workflow. So if the workflow feels right and it feels like it would be able to archive an essence, a soul of a moment, then I will pick that particular workflow. So whichever engine precipitates that, essentially, that's what will be picked, and that's the direction we'll go into. And so the virtual space is very much governed by that beginning process. And then what I usually do is make a music video to test everything together. So as a kind of a idea of like, this is the mood, the feeling, the imagery, the aesthetics, the tone that I want to get in a snapshot, in a playful snapshot. And that allows me to both to test the engine and make sure it's viable for what I'm wanting to do, but at the same time, make something that I could potentially show someone who wants to get involved in the project, so they understand more of the tone and concept. And then from there, it's a bunch of conversations to get them inside of it, to figure out how to correctly position them within this virtual space so that they feel like their soul is there. It's really about trying to capture that soul and essence of that person's soul, not so much of a visual representation of them, but more about if the entire world and work can capture a small part of their being, that for me is a more accurate representation or archive of them.
That's such an amazing answer. I want to ask a bunch more questions in that vein, but I'm going to stick to my script. I'm curious now how you approach bringing these born digital works into physical space, or how you negotiate these like kind of hybrid experiences. I know you sort of create these interesting novel interactions, but yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah, so look, so the reason I say that the audience is one of my main mediums is because watching them interact with a virtual work, for example, say on a computer, is so different for when you set the space by an installation. And so usually the installation is not trying to copy that virtual space, but to invent a new plane of existence with new rules, so that the people don't know how to govern themselves and have to learn how to in this space. And that kind of allows that more curious nature to take over, rather than them taking this traditional art experience and crossing their hands and nodding their heads and shaking their heads and looking
adjusting the scarf. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And stroking the chin and
pushing up the glasses. Yeah, I'm familiar.
slowly walking as they pass it.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I like every time I see your installations, just like the way you approach it is so brilliant. It's nice to hear you shed more light on that.
yeah, usually we have like a terms and conditions before you walk in, so
Mm,
that they read that and it kind of sets their mindset that you're not going to feel comfortable. This may not be your space. It may not be my space even, but this is a new space and you should treat it as such. And that usually puts them on the back foot instantly. And I like that, or gives them an option to not enter. And I think that's really interesting, saying that this is an artwork open to the public that I may not want you to come in.
Now, have you been in your space recently? Or like, when was the last time you came into it?
In my own art spaces?
In City of Dreams in particular?
Oh, yeah, I actually did go into it recently, actually, maybe a month ago.
And what does it feel like to return to that thing that you made, so many years ago?
Oh, God, yeah, it's so weird. It really does feel like a snapshot of time. Like I feel like I know what I was thinking and testing at that point. Like especially when I go into it, I remember I had lost a Unity project around then, and like my entire computer got corrupted, and so for me it feels like a little archive of panic.
Obviously, archives are like a big feature of your work. I would love to hear more about how you approach archiving, like in your practice and in a personal sense. Like, how do you approach like going back to old files, resurrecting, reformatting, revisiting?
So do you mean archive in the sense of like people, but also in the sense of like files I have on my computer?
I really mean in like it's like obviously archiving people is like a central part of your practice, but I guess I want to hear more about how you approach archiving in that way, yes, and also kind of in a personal sense how you deal with all of these files in your computer.
Yeah, so I've been going for a bit of a rehaul in that, but usually I keep one extremely messy folder, which I mean, I think now has like 100,000 things in it. So ridiculous last time. And that I will call my paint. And so usually when I start a project, I just look through there and the first image that jumps out to me, I take it and I will morph it. And usually this morphing process, I have no idea what I want to come out from it. And usually I'll pick a random program. So I might pick a program called Photo Anim to make it into a 3D shape really quickly and then put it into Blender and then light it to see what it does. Or I might slap it into GIMP and edit it like a photo and then make a character out of it and then put that in. So for me, I often like trawl through my photos that I have and trawl through the millions of miscellaneous files that are on my computer and see what I think could be potential now. I think a lot of the files I have gain potential over time and gain significance, because at the time I really don't think much of them, but like old installation shots actually become central features within new work, and old characters that I abandoned get resurrected into like gods in new worlds. So I often look at that as like a small historical archive of characters that I haven't met yet, even though I made them, and I try and re-meet them and negotiate what they might say to me. And then, and I say this a lot, but the work really starts speaking to you once you let them in. And so they start guiding me on, right, you need to go down this process. Remember, you were doing this at the time, so you need to revisit that sound file. Find the sound file, which is probably named BBBB, BBBVB, and then re-edit that sound file and chop it up, and then put in that mix that you were too scared to mix about, and now make it about supremacy. Like that's kind of how it comes. And then from all those disparate images and ideas, I then will write a narrative, and then the narrative will help me build new avatars and 3D objects, which will go into the same file. And I'll use probably about half of them, and then finish that project, and then leave it for another 2 years or something. And then one day those files will come back and haunt my new projects.
That's such a beautiful way to think about it, where these files, even if they're made by you, are kind of, it's as if they were made by somebody else, or even they have their own agency independent of having been created.
Yeah, like sometimes I'll make something and I'll really love it, but I'll know that I can't use it yet. Like I have this image that I made 2 years ago that I know I want to do something with, but I know I'm not allowed to use it for anything yet. And I don't know why. There's no like logical explanation of why that's the case. but it just is. It literally is. I can't use it. It's still sitting where I was thinking about it today, actually. And it's one of those ones that I don't know what they have to say yet. Maybe that's the reason. And at a certain point, I'll know that they can speak. And I know right now that I'm doing a work that once I finish, I will return to these images because it feels like a journey towards them. And so I almost feel like I have to go through this journey in order to get to the place where I think I'm worthy enough to speak to the own works I made before. It's ridiculous.
I mean, it's very reverent. I think that like shows through in a lot of your process. So yeah, I mean, like, I think this is it's such a reverent process for the things that you create. And like, how do you steward this process of archiving other people? Like, how do other people fit into it?
Yeah, and so that's a completely different process where I give them a lot of leeway on exactly how they want to be in the project. So I don't usually tell them how I'm going to archive them. I don't usually know. Usually it's a conversation that begins with me asking, what about yourself do you want to archive? And they usually tell me, I'm saying usually a lot, but they tell me they don't know. That's the most common answer I get. And we work on from there, from the I don't know to maybe this, to actually this is how my life was, to then suddenly this is the character that I need you to build for me. And once we get there, I build that character, I build a world around them, I take some pictures of them and texture the world, the 3D environment with those pictures. And then I probably would record them speaking and then maybe put that in as dialogue, write the dialogue around that, and that will become its own character. And then I can use that to write the story. And so I think it's a much different process. I think I become much more of a mediator rather than anything else. I'm just trying to get them to continue talking and feel comfortable enough to share certain things with me and to give them that creative instinct where I am literally just like the arbiter of making whatever they want. And then once we're done that, and once we finish with that bit, then I become the director and say, okay, now this is how I think the direction we should go. And then I make that and then check in with them. And then if they give me the thumbs up, then I just finish it.
You're almost like a virtual doula. It's like you're sort of stewarding this precious memory from like one world to another.
That's such a nice way of putting it. I wish I could say I was that good.
If you don't want to, I'll say it. I think you're that good.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that I asked you all of these questions, or like I feel like I know you a lot better than I did before. So yeah, I'm really, really grateful. That concludes my line of questioning. So now I will switch to screen sharing, and then we can go into your wonderful world.
Oh, thank you. City of Dream, the revisitation. Is it 2021? That's really wild.
Yeah, I think it came out during the festival, the first anniversary festival. So I think it just turned 2.
Oh my God.
That's like 15 years in new media terms. So will you read the exhibition statement before we go in?
It's just my bio.
Oh, right. Wow. Well, we can skip it if you want.
Yes,
we'll
please.
have an updated bio for you on the website anyway.
Yes, please. Let's skip this.
Okay. So we materialize on this kind of bloody looking street with a super glitched out low res convertible, it's like a sports car that's like lime green in front of us. It's all crumpled up and it occasionally is animated and like flips over and stuff. There's this like dense yellow fog, and there are some like low poly buildings in the distance. One of them is tiled with all these images and there's text over top that says, "This can change your life." And there are a bunch of these kind of fleshy, low-res figures dancing in formation in the middle of the street. So what can you tell me, Danielle? What do you have to say about this area?
Yeah, so my immediate memory goes to, oh thank goodness, thank you for turning that down. My immediate memory goes to the textures. So on the building, this can change your life. I've got pictures of hair shops I've been in. Um, and so these are like London hair shops that I've kind of edited them a little bit, and some of them are taken from online though actually. Um, and so I edited them actually. I think I edited them in Paint because I was loving Paint right there. So it really reminds me of South London and home, which is quite funny. The figures that are dancing around in the street are made from this laser epilator I bought, or to my partner at the time bought for me, which is supposed to remove my facial hair, which never worked actually,
Mm.
but extremely painful still. And so I think this was the time I was still hopeful that it would work. So I wanted to archive them in these laser hair forms that dance on the street. That yes, they were supposed to be like black trans people as part of a protest who have also lasered their face, but they're not really protesting; they're kind of dancing for the lives of others.
Wow, I never would have guessed. This is one of the things I was looking forward to asking you about because I knew these characters had a story.
Yeah. Yeah, so they have this story of essentially being like black trans people who laser their face or who fail basically lasering their face, because this is what they do, lasering faces. Because this was it wasn't very expensive, but it promised to work on all the skin tones, but it doesn't. Um,
Mm.
Pretty much a waste of money. And then this hand in the middle of the street, I actually ended up using later on as like this supremacy hand underneath the water that would grab your ankles and drag you down. And the idea of this was actually, this is so out there, no one's ever going to get this, but it was that actually that this hand emanated from the ships of like slave ships that were sunken underneath the ocean, and they appear in a later on work around that. And it was kind of talking, that work was talking about if the wood remembers the history of being slave ships and carrying those bodies, and if wood can remember the histories, and if that wood came alive, what would it do?
Mm.
But essentially, this is just the texture of that, of one of those hands that came out the wood there. And I think I just put this in to represent something that the fog was fighting against in this world. Um, and then I think if we go,
Oh,
let's
let me
go.
describe the hand briefly first. It looks kind of like rasterized, or maybe that's not the right word. It's kind of pixelated, these like red like paint kind of textures, and it's a lot brighter, more golden around the fingers, and it's like wrist and hand reaching up, and there are these kind of capillaries running through the hand.
And
Um,
on the far right is like a building made out of the wood.
ah,
And if you look up, there's a sail.
mm-hmm.
It doesn't look like a sail; just looks very like a very artistic, a brutalism building, basically.
Yeah.
Um, and inside of that is a film called Unarchived Adventures. So this was my first, how to say, I called it like concept film. So it was the first film that I made for a game that I wanted to make that I didn't know how to make at the time. And so when I had an idea for a game I wanted to build, I think Unarchived Adventures was made in 2019. I would build a film that showed essentially a walkthrough of the game, um, in the hopes that one day I would be able to make it, and this film would help me construct everything. I should make that damn game. I haven't made that game yet, but now that's going to be the next project I do, I think. Um, and this image that you're seeing is taken from another game called BlackTransAir.com, also called I Always Needed You,
Mm-hmm.
which is about a fog that overtakes the city in order to allow people that find it difficult to breathe an atmosphere that they can breathe more easily in. And it was made around, I think, 2021 when the Black Lives Matter protests were happening. And I was thinking that these people are putting their lives in danger so that others in the future may breathe easier. Yeah, so that kind of explains everything in this one.
That's so beautiful, really moving. And what we're seeing here is this looping video, and it looks kind of embossed. There are a lot of these, they almost look like AI generated carnations and all of these kind of swirling patterns. And there are two vertical strips of three flowers, kind of almost looking like they're on seashells. And in the middle, there's this embossed image that says, "Remembering you forever." And there's a light that's blinking open and closed over the scene. Very like shrine like. I don't know if you identify with that.
Yeah, that it's so in the scene in the actual game, they're from a trans temple. So you
Hmm.
go in there to pay respects to like any trans people that you've lost in your life. And then I think directly behind you, through the wall, yeah, we can go down this tunnel.
Yeah, we're going into this sort of metallic looking like blank building facade, and now we're going into a tunnel, and there's this green text banding all the way down the tunnel that says, "We won't let them be buried again," over and over and over again.
And then I think when you get, and if you go down all the way to the tunnel, I think there's like a secret room. I assume no one would be bothered to get to, knowing the retention time for these kind of works. Um, and so at the time I was and this is kind of an ode to an older work. Well, one of the first works I made actually after Black Trans Archive, which was a game called BlackTransC.com, or also called Pirating Blackness. And it
Hmm.
was about, you know, going on the journey that your ancestors went across the sea. And depending on who your ancestors were, you might have to go through both. So I would have to go through both journeys. And your ship would either survive or not to keep others living. So if your ancestors were part of slavery, as half my ancestors were, then that ship would not survive in order that others would be able to survive and they wouldn't carry anyone else across the sea. And at the time, I was toying with this idea of making viruses to send to galleries to claim back reparations. Um, I didn't do that in the end for not being sued. But yeah, I basically there was this amazing scam call I got that said that they have an open police report on me and I need to call this number back if I need to close a police report. And on the phone, I was like, whoa, like, oh my God, what's happened? And then I put it down and I was like, that sounds like an absolute scam. And it was the best piece of performance art I had heard over a phone ever. You know, till this day, I think it's the best piece of performance art ever because it was so effective. It almost got me to do everything, change my life and think I'm a criminal. But I knew I hadn't done anything at the same time. And so it really reminded me of these like kind of ARG games where you phone in and change the world. And so I kind of started thinking about scamming as this ultimate kind of art, this frontier of art that currently hasn't really been used to say anything. Um, yeah, I think I really want to return to that idea actually.
I mean, I would welcome a computer virus from you. And what we're seeing wallpapering this chamber at the end of the tunnel are a bunch of Windows XP dialog boxes that say the header says more objects, and then there's a lock and key, and it says click here to return more stolen artifacts. And you have two options: to more artifacts or repent.
And I think it's just do this till the end. There's no, yeah, that's
Yeah, dead
it.
end.
And then you have to go all the way back. Yeah. Oh gosh. And I think I also had discovered this game called Kingsfield, which is the first game made by From Software on the PS1. And so I was really interested in these like dead end tunnels and this useless, very tiny amount of polygons used to basically make you go down one route, because of that in Get the Game, they trick you a lot. And so I guess we can go to the supermarket on the far left. Yeah. Oh, so first off, there's just this, which is the Black Trans Archive. We're here because of those that are not. So if you click on this, you get to play that archive. Um, yeah. So this whole world is kind of just like it's almost like just a portal into all my other works. but just a really nice portal instead of my horrible looking website. So yeah, this is an archive that we made in 2020 of about 15, well, 10 to 15, I can't remember now. We've extended it. Black trans people. So in 2023, sorry, we added more people into it. I think it was 4 more Black trans people from Australia. Then, so the context was very different there. And I'm hopefully going to not only extend this, but now remake it, remaster the entire thing, and create a way that anyone can add their own sections, so that
Oh,
it should
wow.
be this like, I don't know if you've ever played a game called Fallen London,
Mm-mm.
but essentially it's like an amazing text-based world that you can go into. But I want to make one of those like this, but instead there's like a way that you can generate your own videos and characters in them, and it just keeps going forever. And so you can make it as big as possible and finish any kind of story you need, but at the same time download your section off so that you get to archive your own section.
Can you tell me what that game is one more time? Sorry.
That game is what the remake of this game, which is not out
Oh,
yet.
the game that you referenced. It was something London.
Oh, Fallen London. There's also, so Fallen London is the online one that you play on your browser. They also made one called Sunless Sea, which is based on the same world, but instead it came out on consoles and PC. And then they made Sunless Skies, which again is based on the same world, and they got rid of the guy that was really annoying as part of the development team, and it's the first game that they've made without him. So I've got to promote that one.
Yeah, I just wanted to make because the captioning is decent, but I want to make sure that the things that need to be corrected are corrected.
Cool.
Let's
And
go to the
then
supermarket, hey?
yeah, we have the supermarket. So weird seeing this.
This pixel dither is really good with all of the like rainbow colors, and there's this like red extruded texture up above, and then the text says "Look under the water," like ringing around the building. So let's go inside. Oh, is it just a facade?
I think there's an entrance down right. I should have made the entrance there.
I see. And so we have these, they look like AI generated water bottles on a shelf. They look a little bit like wonky and purple, and there's vertical text in green banded all across that says this can change your life. And these are like tiled in squares all over the shelves.
And so this shop was kind of imagining what it might be like if hormones were just in random hair shops. And so you could go pick up, stuff for your hair and a bottle of hormones. And the idea that like something as simple as picking up hormones would really be able to change a lot of people's lives. Like that's literally the only reason this shop exists. Because I just have this fascination with, imagine if it was, in LA, when you go and buy weed, it's very, very straightforward. But imagine if it's the same with like taking hormones for a trans person, like that would be life changing. It would be so amazing. But that's just really not the case at all.
God, especially in the UK.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. Like especially in UK and Germany and most of the world, it's a nightmare to get any sort of hormones. And usually you have to resort to kind of either like by going for a private route, paying a lot of money, or getting it from friends, or there's a good community of people that do that. But just imagining if it was just as simple as going into a shop and buying wine, or buying hair products would actually be so simple and change your life so much and allow people to have a lot more like mental ease with just such a simple act.
Just to be alive. Yeah, I totally agree.
And then, so I think that's it for the shop. Nothing else really. And that's not really explained in there. That's just for me, I guess. And then, so this is a shot from, again, the game blacktransair.com, or I've Always Needed You. Oh, I can't remember. It's actually called, I can't remember a time I didn't need you. Sorry about that. But this is the shot of the people who are protesting, who make that yellow fog. And so this yellow fog should kill or keep people living depending on who you are, like the invisible fog that we breathe now. And so the fog just represents essentially the a atmosphere that a city builds. And this one, I hope, would allow Black trans people to breathe easily.
Would that it be true? Yeah, we're seeing the same color fog that's kind of obscuring the whole world, and we're seeing a bunch of like shadowy people, like a huge crowd standing maybe inside of a square, and there's just like these huge skyscrapers towering over them.
And then
Terms and conditions. This one was so good.
and they're just terms and conditions for the space. I'll read them out. It says, terms and conditions. We are committed to making this space one that centers Black trans people. As part of our commitment, we agree to uphold Black trans voices, have a zero tolerance to anti-trans sentiment in the workplace, showcase and invest in the works of Black trans artists, make the space accessible to Black trans people. In entering this space, you are also agreeing to uphold these conditions. If you do not agree to these terms and conditions, you must leave. And so this was a failed NFT attempt. And so essentially, when the NFT market went crazy, I wanted to make something that you would have to buy and stick on your gallery and agree to for a set number of years. And so I had the idea of selling terms and conditions that you'd have to display in your gallery for 2 years or something. Of course, no one wanted it. No one wanted it at all. But because NFTs was all about not really investing and or not really investing in the reason the work's made, just more investing in the work itself as stocks and shares, at least in my opinion currently. And everything I've seen. Yeah, and so that was kind of the failed attempt. So I kind of repurposed it and put it here. And I love writing terms and conditions for work. I think it's one of the most I think it's one of the best things I ever decided to do. It really sets the space and also sets the pace in which I should work at and everyone else should work at. And now when we work with groups of people, we wrap them together, which is really, really lovely. And sometimes there's things I don't agree with in there, but that's part of the whole thing. I don't feel super comfortable as well, and that's completely great.
That's so beautiful. I didn't realize that was part of your process. Yeah, that's really, really cool.
And then I think we only have 2 more spaces up. I think further up, down the street, we have this building, or these 2 buildings on the right and these 2 buildings on the left, actually.
So we have Resurrection Lands through the hair shop.
Right. And so Resurrection Lands is, Lord, this game is funny. So in 2019, when I really wanted to start making games, I actually did make one using the Blender game engine. And it failed and was so terrible. No one has ever seen it since. It was awful. It was basically, I had kept this space as a diary for like 2 years while I was learning Blender. It's the space that you see now. And I turned it into a game using the Blender game engine. And I had no idea what I was doing. And so everyone fell through the world. And so it was basically unplayable. You couldn't really do anything, coded terribly, ran awfully, zero optimization. No computer could run it because it wasn't even built to run on anything. And so a year or 2 years later, I remade it. And so I remade an online version of it called Resurrection Lands. And as part of that, made a 40-minute animation explaining what the point of the world was. And that was a lot better. And so here you can play the online version of the remake of the game. And that's something I really feel like I need to do more in my practice, is go back, look at works and completely remake them, because that remaking this game changed the entire work and made it a lot better and a lot more poignant. Before it was kind of just a random space you walked about, and now it had a reason to exist. And so I'm really glad I did that, and actually it's something that I envy that I should do more now.
Yeah, I think that's it's a very generative process, and you're like seeing the work with new eyes and like new kind of technical capabilities. And I mean, making it more accessible too.
Yeah.
Oh, I see we have some hormones on the shelf in here as well.
And hormones everywhere, very free and easy to buy.
Mm.
And then yeah, across the road, I can't remember what's here actually. Oh, there's the own. Oh yeah, this is me. So this is actually that's my face. You can't tell, but that is actually my face. Um, yeah, and this is just me, I guess, trying to archive myself. Like that was it. It was actually, so this is actually a good point. So earlier on I talked about making music videos to test things. This was a music video testing a new version of Blender. It's a Blender 3.0. I think it was 2.98 or something actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was testing all the new add-ons. So there was Bloom, there was I think Better Motion Blur, and so I was just testing them all. So I made a small video using an old model that I never used, um, and yeah, I've never used it since. Um, yeah, and so that's all that this is really.
This character, I feel like, is very characteristic of the way that you animate figures, or like the limbs are super low poly, they almost look completely flat, and then there's sort of a barely discernible like glowing face with this like wispy white hair. It looks a bit like it's raining. The camera is like moving around in a pretty human way, and there's this like laser rain that's like blurring up through the scene.
Yeah, that's a great description of the image. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's like neon hell. It's like if you met this person in real life, you would be not happy about where you were. But I often think like I often love these like kind of demon depictions.
Hmm.
I actually started calling them demon babies. I don't want to. Yeah, and like I often like the things look scary in my work. They often really do look scary and creepy and weird. And that's the point. And I think at the beginning, very beginning of my career, I was struggling with the idea of feeling like a monster and feeling like a demon and being called a demon by my grandma and stuff like this. And so I was trying to figure out how there was power in that. So I think that's why a lot of my work, Black trans people and trans people, are not depicted as human, but are incredibly amazing when you meet them in the world. And so your initial response is usually to take a step back, but everything they do wants you to take a step forward.
Absolutely. It's like there are people who say they've never met a trans person. It's like, no, there are a ton of us. You've probably just never knowingly met a trans person, right?
Right,
And
right,
so it's like all you're bringing is the it's like, if somebody says something transphobic to me in public, I'm like, honey, you watch too much TV.
right, exactly. And then I think the one on the left is just a random. I don't know if there's anything in there on the left. No, it's just words.
It's yeah, they're kind of like reversed, so I can't really read them. It's like, are you reading the text or are you looking at it? It's more of this green text.
Yeah, it's more of I think more of a little visual thing. I think
Mm-hmm.
some of that text um, are the differences. Let's say, dear Black trans people, the words help me is something that you may be often thinking, but maybe you trained yourself not to say it, not to give anyone the chance to let you down. Oh, that's sad. Maybe you found a way of helping yourself in every situation to ensure that you will survive properly. I wish I
I think
didn't
just
have
be okay.
to may this be okay. I wish we didn't have to make these choices alone. I feel like I am always making choices alone. Oh, so sad. That's probably just literally a snapshot of my mental state in that moment.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, there's just so that you're so present in every part of the space, and it's like, even without you guiding us through it, it's really really evocative. But it's such a gift to like come back to this space with you and hear more about it in your own words.
Oh, thank you so much. So nice.
Is there anything else that you want to speak to before we turn off the recording?
No, I think that's it. I think that's it. I think yeah, I think that's really it. Um, Thank you so much
Tremendous.
for having me and for doing this. This has actually been really lovely and revisiting this. And now I want to remake this one. Yeah, I can't remake every work.